we see for the first time, I suppose, in years, a very big difference between Labour and the Conservatives. I mean, certainly since Jeremy Corbyn's time anyway.
Well, I mean, with the big caveat that Liz Truss seems to be happy to borrow as much as Jeremy Corbyn is happy to borrow, but her rhetoric, her policies in terms of tax cuts is very, very different to Labour. And I think Keir Starmer is really comfortable with that. It's interesting that on the weekend, some Labour sources were talking to the papers and saying how they found Boris Johnson such a slippery customer to deal with because Boris Johnson had his fingers in all of the pie, so you couldn't pin down his political opinions. Whereas with Liz Truss, very easy to do that. And so you can see Labour coming out and saying reinstating the top rate of tax, because that is a very clear dividing line between the two of them. You know, why would you cut tax for the rich unless you're Liz Truss and that's a certain ideology, and Keir Starmer says we're a different ideology. And you see them going on the green stuff, and that's very, very clear blue water. So I think, you know, Labour is actually for the first time, as you say, quite comfortable with the position that they're able to carve out for themselves. I think the only difference, as I say, is that Liz Truss is happy to borrow as much as Jeremy Corbyn was happy to borrow in his wildest dreams.
Which is quite extraordinary when you think about it, and also when we think about the cost of borrowing. And I suppose the big question in all of this is the free market, and, you know, can we afford to do it? And will this work, this gamble that everybody seems to agree this is? It could work, it could be wonderful. But the market seems a bit wobbly about it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the markets closed on Friday with the pound at 1.09 to the dollar, which is quite low. Yeah. You know, considering that 10 years ago it was £1 to $2, you know, it's almost halved. And today, as the markets open in Asia, is now to 1.03. And
that's the lowest it ever has been. And I just want, I mean, a lot of people will try and argue that this is because actually the dollar's doing really, really well. And this is to do with America's energy security and also the way it's been handling interest rates there. Is there some truth in that? I mean, is it a bit of both of those things, that the pound's not doing well, but the dollar is also doing particularly?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. When you look at the dollar compared to other world currencies, which are also, you know, you can see a dollar strengthening story going on over there. So it's not just a pound story, but the pounds plummeting over the last few days is specifically about this not budget event, right?
It's interesting to listen to you talk, because it really is now about policy, showing differences between the two parties, because we've got two leaders of these parties, bit of a question mark over Liz Truss from a lot of people in terms of her persona and performances. But Keir Starmer, here we have actually a very uncharismatic man who's actually holding strong and doing well, obviously based on policy alone, one would have thought.
And I think based on the Tories not doing well. You know, I think Partygate, the internal party wranglings over the last year, then this really poisonous leadership race where the Labour Party was literally able to create an attack video based on what Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss were saying about each other in the Conservative governments, successive Conservative governments. And now you've got this Prime Minister that seems to be only looking out for a certain part of the population. So I think it is also because the Conservative Party is not doing well. And if Keir Starmer were to face a more charismatic opponent, like Boris Johnson, within the party, like, for example, Wes Streeting, his shadow health secretary, he's been making the rounds a little bit in the last few weeks in terms of talking to the papers. Yeah. You know, I think I would be wondering how well he would do. But for now, you know, he's in place. He seems to have strengthened his faction of the party. He's making the most out of the Tory weakness. But as you say, is well, you know, if this gamble pays off for Liz Truss,
but